Start a Therapy Practice podcast, episode number 71. Now, what's pretty cool today is I'm sitting here recording this intro during the eclipse. So it's starting to get pretty dark at my house. I think we're getting about maybe 85-90% coverage. I was going to drive up to my family's house up in Missouri where they get 100% coverage, but I was afraid of the traffic. So I didn't want to get caught in 500,000 people leaving my hometown of 5,000 people. That'd be crazy. But yeah, I'm recording this during the eclipse. I hope you enjoyed the eclipse. I know my kids were super excited about it. I want to mention real quick that I look at my stats on my podcast, and I recently surpassed 100,000 downloads. Now, for me, that is crazy numbers. I mean, for you to be listening to me and that many people be listening is so humbling, but I'm so grateful for each of you listening. For you listening, I mean, you're taking this amount of time out of your day to hopefully learn something from me. So 100,000 downloads, even let's just say 10% are one-time listeners. That's 10,000 people. And then I think about, what if I was speaking to 10,000 people at the same time? And then my stomach turns and flip-flops. I'm like, oh my goodness, 10,000 people. That's crazy. But 100,000 downloads, that is awesome. I really appreciate you listening and finding that much value from my podcast. It's just crazy to think about. Thank you. All right, let's say you wanted to climb a very tall mountain. I mean, it's pretty treacherous. You know, it's very tall. It's got some switchbacks. How are you going to approach climbing that mountain? Well, you could just pick out a path and say, I think that's going to be the best path right there to get to the very top of this mountain. Now, there's many choices up the mountain. Some of them look better than others, but you really don't know which way is the best way. So what should you do? You really would benefit from hiring a guide who's been up that mountain at least most of the way, if not all of the way, to show you the best way up the mountain and to avoid the pitfalls, maybe possibly even falling off the mountain. But the most efficient and quickest way for you to get up the mountain, making as few errors as possible. That's what I want to be for you, the guide up the mountain of private practice. I want to decrease the amount of mistakes that you're going to make or possibly even falling off of this mountain called private practice. So I appreciate you joining me listening to this podcast today. How far you make it up the mountain is up to you. I want to be your guide and give you as much information and help as possible, but how far you go up that mountain is totally up to you. All right, if you've not joined me on the podcast before, my name is Scott Harmon. I'm an occupational therapist. I own 2 brick-and-mortar pediatric therapy clinics. We provide speech therapy, OT, and PT. And now I get to help people like you start or improve their private practice. If you've not been by the website, startatherapypractice.com, I have some free forms over there, all kinds of free tools. I really get a kick out of creating little short videos or little how-tos and show you how I'm doing things that might help you in your private practice. Also have an ebook called Start and Run a Therapy Practice, and my flagship tool for you is called the Academy of Private Practice. Now, membership to the Academy only opens about 3, maybe 4 times a year, so it might not be open right now when you're listening to this, but go over to startatherapypractice.com and scroll down a little bit and you'll find a button there that says Join the Academy, and you can see if membership is open right now. Now, in this podcast, Brandon Seigel comes back and joins me, and we talk about teletherapy. Now, this is an exciting avenue for you to provide therapy or mentorship to your therapist in your private practice. I can't necessarily say that teletherapy is new, or telemedicine, whatever you want to call it. We actually get into defining some terms later on. But it is new enough that you're going to want some information. What are the options out there as far as providing teletherapy? What are the rules? I mean, there's going to be some rules, right? There's always rules in medicine, so we go over that also. What are the uses for teletherapy? Brandon and I cover different things that you can do with teletherapy. So we go over best practices, rules and regulations, how to market therapy, what research has been done for teletherapy, how to build teletherapy, software options for teletherapy. Now, don't worry, you don't have to write all this down because I've created a teletherapy cheat sheet. So go over to startatherapypractice.com/71. You can download that free cheat sheet. It's information that Brandon and I have put together on all kinds of great resources. I probably looked at least 30 different teletherapy software companies that help you or would allow you to provide teletherapy in your practice. And the one I use is called BlueJ. And I'll put a link both in the show notes and in the teletherapy cheat sheet to BlueJ Teletherapy. Now, just for total transparency, I am an affiliate for BlueJ, but I also use BlueJ in my private practice. It's really the best option that I found out there. I used BlueJ Teletherapy before I actually became an affiliate for them because I thought it was that good. There is a discount code in the cheat sheet in that link on the post, startatherapypractice.com/71. You will get a discount for the first 3 months that you use BlueJ. And I mean, at that point, you're going to know this is what I want to use or I want to try something else. There's no yearly contract. It is a month-to-month contract, so you can drop it anytime. That was a big factor in me choosing BlueJ. But once I began to use it, I was like, whoa, this is powerful. So be sure to go by startatherapypractice.com/71, get that free cheat sheet, and click on the link and check out BlueJ. Now, Brandon does mention that if you're confused on how you would use BlueJ or you just would like to see it work, BlueJ does have some very good tutorials for you to see how that really works. But if Brandon offers, if you would like for him to walk you through it, just call him up and I'll put a link to his email. You can email him and he'll walk you through it, just how it looks and how it operates and how you can use it. So that's a free consult with Brandon. I will go ahead and offer the same offer if you'd like for me to demonstrate how it looks on my end. Just send me email, scott@startatherapypractice.com. All right, with that, let's get to this talk about teletherapy with me and Brandon. Here we go. Hey, Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Scott. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. You're in the great Republic of Texas, right?
I am a new Texan.
That means you have abandoned your allegiance to the Cincinnati Bengals and you are now a Dallas Cowboys fan, right?
Not yet. I'm still Cincinnati through and through.
That's okay. Well, that's a big football town down there in Dallas. You're going to have a good time in the great Republic of Texas.
I'm excited for high school football.
It's big down there.
Oh, yeah.
Real big down there. I want you to catch people up. Let us know what we were talking before the podcast here. You've got some big things coming up as far as what you're working on. You got some speaking gigs going on. Tell the audience what you're working on.
So, Scott, I've been blessed, and it's hard to believe, but I think it's been over a year we've been talking, and I've been honored to be featured on your podcast. And throughout that time, a lot has developed. My consulting practice, which is Wellness Works Management Partners, has been thriving in terms of helping occupational, physical, speech therapists of all different walks of life expand and build a better bottom line. Is kind of my focus with them. But through that, I've also had some incredible speaking engagements. And I will be speaking at the National APTA CSM Conference. I will be at the Texas Occupational Therapy Association Conference. I'll be at a bunch of regional APT and speech conferences, as well as potentially the AOTA conference in Utah. So there's a lot coming up on the pipe. But then I also yesterday was excited and honored that I officially signed a publishing contract, and I have a new book that we are working on. We are in the editing phase, but we are looking for a launch sometime in 2018. My hope is that it will roll out by the end of first quarter 2018. And right now, the working title is The Private Practice Survival Guide, Secrets to Unlocking the Freedom from Success.
Awesome.
So I'm really excited about that. And just continuing to look for ways to team up and partner with all the incredible clinicians out there to build a better healthcare system and support the community at large.
Well, and I've never been in on a live presentation of yours, but I've seen some online, and you do a really good job. So I encourage people, if able to check you out in one of your presentations in one of those conferences, definitely do it. So good for you. You're a busy man.
I try to be. Busy is what keeps us growing.
That's
what I
right.
always say.
My mom used to tell me it keeps us out of trouble, right?
Yes.
Well, today we're going to talk about teletherapy, or we got some different terms for it here. And we were talking, I think that's a good place to start as far as just some definition of terms. Some terms I've heard it called: telemedicine, telehealth, telerehabilitation, e-health, m-health. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big umbrella. The big thing that I find is the differentiation of terms, even though they're very synonymous. Telemedicine often is going to be physician-based telecare. Telehealth is an all-encompassing term. So anything that happens related to healthcare and digital is getting wrapped under this umbrella of telehealth. And then the other one that I hear a lot is telepractice. And telepractice has kind of been a term that speech-language pathologists have adopted as their way of delivering speech therapy in a telehealth format, video visit format, however you want to call it. But one of the things that I think people also need to realize is that there's this technology platform that empowers you to deliver healthcare, and that is all within this telehealth component. But there's so many tools that can be offered within a platform, and so you have to think outside the box and not just limit yourself to thinking all of telehealth, telemedicine, telepractice, telerehab looks one way, and just understand that these are a lot of terms that are synonymous, and ultimately what we're trying to communicate is that this is a medium or delivery method with tools related to healthcare and telecommunication tools all encompassed.
And I came across a couple of terms in my research, and one of those being synchronous, which indicates that the telepractice, teletherapy session is conducted with interactive audio and video in real time. That's kind of what we think about when we think about the telepractice. And then there's another term called asynchronous, and that definition says images and data are captured and transmitted for later viewing. So that's probably a pre-recorded video or audio. And I think mostly what we're talking about today, you and I, is the synchronous, is the real-time video session as far as teletherapy and telepractice.
Absolutely. Something I will bring up, though, that is under the umbrella of telehealth is actually monitoring. And so because of the technology, they also are encompassing blood sugar monitoring and these other technologies where doctors, physicians, therapists may not be delivering necessarily the live video feed, but are monitoring real-time numbers and metrics related to someone's health.
And there's, and we'll talk about this later, there's different softwares out there as far as the provision of teletherapy that allows you to assign tasks, exercises, and then basically have that patient be accountable where you can see if they actually perform those tasks. And we'll talk about that more later when we talk about the software that delivers that. But I did want to mention, we do have a telepractice cheat sheet. And so it's sort of the culmination of Brandon and I's research on telepractice, and you can download it. If you go over to startatherapypractice.com/71, you can have that for free. On there is best practices, some links to the rules and regulations, links on how to market teletherapy, links on the research as far as the how does teletherapy actually work. So there's some research links in there, links about billing for teletherapy, links to other sources on how to provide teletherapy, so you don't have to stop as far as learning about teletherapy from us. There's other places you can learn about how to provide teletherapy, and software options. And so I counted it up. I've got like 40 links in there, and of that, 14 of them are different software options as far as how to provide teletherapy. And Brandon's got even more links. So we're going to put all kinds of information in there. So startatherapypractice.com/71 to get that free cheat sheet. With that, Brandon, I want to go, do you want to start on some rules and regulations?
Yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about the evolution, what's going on, and how the regulations are evolving, et cetera. And so I call it the telehealth frontier. 5 years ago, someone came up to me and was like, Brandon, you got to look at telehealth and telerehab for your practice. And 5 years ago, I was like, there's no way, it's not going to happen. You're living in another world. In the last 18 months, the evolution of telehealth and telemedicine has shifted, changed, grown dramatically, where it is as if like the iPad and iPod just got launched. That's how fast things are getting adopted. I don't know if you remember back in the day when we had MP3 players and wasn't really adopted, and then all of a sudden came that little iPod and just the world blew up into a whole new technology. Mm-hmm. That's what's happening right now, telehealth. And part of that is the regulations and the systems that are buying in, funding, and evolving. But a lot of it also is the way that the technology that's being created is helping improve and optimize clinical outcomes. And so a couple of things that I just wanted to share, some stats that I have that I think are important. The first is actually from Becker's Hospital Review, just for everyone to know. They've indicated that telemedicine is expected to grow from 250,000 patient users in 2013, again, back when I was like, there's no way this is going to hit, to 7 million patient users by 2018. That's next year, everyone.
Wow.
That's huge. I mean, if that's not a sign of let's jump on this bandwagon, I don't know what is. It's incredible. The other thing that they're saying is that telehealth is expected to grow in the U.S. at a compound annual growth rate of 27.5% in revenue, reaching $9.35 billion by 2021. That's
wow.
Huge.
You said that with a B.
Yeah, a B, yes. Billion. Yeah. And then the other thing to know is that more than 29 states and the District of Columbia are already upholding laws mandating health plans to cover telemedicine services. And so as we talk about regulations, everyone thinks, one of the misnomers that I always hear is, Brandon, insurance doesn't cover because Medicare doesn't cover, or Medicare doesn't recognize occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. Therefore, we can't do it. Like Medicare tells us what to do. Medicare is one funding source, and they definitely are a big funding source. And there are a lot of people that wait to jump on the bandwagon until Medicare endorses it. But two things. I already know there's a bill in place that people are working on with Medicare. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's coming, and I will share that. But the other thing is there are a lot of insurances that are paying for it, and people don't even realize it. And there are a lot of ways that you can utilize the tool to increase revenue, empower and engage your patients while bringing in all new forms of compensation outside of just the insurance game. So I like to point that out. Scott, do you know who the biggest early adopter of telemedicine has been?
I would guess doctors, but I could say psychologists too, psychiatrists, as far as counselors.
So doctors and psychologists have been huge in this arena. But the company or group or whatever you want to call it that is funding and paying the most is actually our VA. The VA is an early adopter of telehealth. They have put millions and millions of dollars into telehealth. And just last week, the President of the United States and the Veterans Affairs Secretary, Dr. David Shulkin, introduced a new app, part of a plan to build out telehealth tools and services for veterans throughout the country. So it's pretty incredible when your VA is growing and adopting it in this capacity. You have to think that Medicare is going to jump on board sooner than later. Yeah,
they're prototyping that with the VA. That seems clear to me. I came across a survey that ASHA did in 2016. They surveyed almost 500 speech therapists, and of those speech therapists, 64 of the respondents are providing teletherapy. And of those speech therapists, 56% of those are in private practice. Now, these people, our audience right now, are in private practice. That's why they're listening to us. So the trend is there. People are using it. And hopefully, from what you and I are going to tell our audience, our listeners here, we're going to help them use it also.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I know a lot of clinicians don't know about is that school districts throughout the country are paying for telehealth now. They're paying private practices such as yours, Scott, to deliver teletherapy from your clinic to their school. And I've even been helping many private practices throughout the country create their whole system and actually launch and optimize their school contracts by getting the same exact pay that they're getting when they deliver on-site, but complementing it with also the telehealth side. And so it's very exciting because school-based therapy is huge. And there is a ton of companies right now that have just adopted it and are scaling, growing big time because of this. So if you're looking for a differentiation strategy with your school contracts and you just can't staff enough, you should look at the telehealth side of things.
Yes, and that's where my practice is right now as far as rolling out teletherapy and offering that to different public schools in our state. And one of the angles that I take there is that there are national companies that are pitching this to schools throughout the nation. But my point to my local school districts here is, wouldn't you rather work with someone local? We provide the same service. We provide better service because I can show up in your school and attend that IEP meeting. And I just inform them and educate them what teletherapy can do. And they're not aware in my state, and this is in different states, Medicaid may or may not cover teletherapy, but my state just passed a law that Medicaid will start funding teletherapy provided for kids in a school district. And so the schools here don't even know that. So I'm informing them of that and then letting them know we already do this in my clinic. We can roll in here and either take over the contract and provide all of it, or we can supplement. You're going to have some overflow with your current therapist. Let us supplement that and help out with some teletherapy.
Absolutely. And I think that's great that you brought that up, because I actually think supporting your local schools through this is the key, because I'm a big believer that in order to deliver the greatest care, there still has to be some physical capability. And this is where the misnomers come along, because I get therapists that all come up to me and they go, Brandon, you're trying to kill our clinical model. And I say, well, what do you mean? What? I'm not trying to kill your clinical model. They're like, we're a one-to-one. We need to see, touch, feel, etc. And what I tell them, Scott, is I say, I'm not trying to replace that. I'm trying to add another tool in your toolbox, because the problem in today's environment is there's not enough of you out there. And wouldn't you rather someone get some of you than none of you? And the other component is, what if you be twice the amount of kids where you were seeing once a month on site and the rest of the month was off site? You know, there's ways, or maybe you're using it as a coaching model to a clinician that's on site. Because you and I both know not everyone has the expertise, Scott, that you bring to the table or that some of your therapists do. And sometimes they utilize you to mentor and teach their teachers, their therapists. Maybe it's a collaboration with the speech language pathologist that's in the school. So there's a lot of ways to utilize the technology and the HIPAA compliant software in a way that would be effective for the best outcomes, and not just trying to replace what it is you do as an occupational therapist.
Do you see in the future, as this gets rolled out and more insurances cover it, and eventually Medicare is going to cover it, do you see this? I see this as being a necessity that a private practice, at least of a certain size, must offer. Do you see that?
Absolutely. I see it as the vehicle for scaling greater care in a successful private practice. And it's interesting because I was working with a pediatric physical therapy company in Northern California, and they said, Brandon, I can't staff PT in the schools. I said, well, let's first talk about that. Why? Well, there's none out here. It's like 1% of the PT population. There's none. I can't recruit them. Doesn't matter how much I pay, can't find them. So what if you could go out and do the on-site consult and have pediatric physical therapists walk an APE instructor through the clinical side of the support in correlation with the IEP that's been outlined? That would be amazing. Oh my gosh, Brandon, that's such a great idea. Lo and behold, launched it, the school district jumped on it, and she now has a thriving school-based PT practice through it. And the care, I asked her, I said, do you feel that they're getting better care? She said they were getting no care. Now they're getting some care. They're getting great care. And we're training and teaching those that are on site to work with the children, which carry through is so important, because even everyone knows in IEP terms, you never get enough time with the kids. That's just the bottom line. So being able to educate, empower, and support the staff that is with that child every day, that is so important.
Yep. Well, and this brings me back to the idea of providing in the school. Of course, each school and each state can have different rules, but you touched on something as far as providing the supervision for an assistant. Now, there's different rules. You have to check that out for your own state, and we do have links in this cheat sheet to the different rules. But that's a great offer to have a PTA, an assistant, or even an OT assistant to go provide the services. And then through teletherapy, the PT or the OT can provide the supervision. So it's a great way to kind of fill that gap right there.
And I'm going to one-up you on this. What about clinical mentorship?
Yeah.
Because I speak at universities throughout the country, and I love these OT, PT, speech students, but the majority of them, the number one thing they're not getting is mentorship. And what if you had a tool, if they're not under your nose every day, where you could go out and groom them to be the next great therapist through telemedicine, telehealth, teletherapy tools? Because I think that's so important, especially in niche areas. And when you're working with specific populations, especially in the neuro side, I think having that mentor through a clinical tool like a telehealth tool is so effective.
Let's go into some of the specific rules and regulations that you see as far as the provision of teletherapy. I mean, we have issues about HIPAA and also FERPA. As far as we have to keep this confidential. What are you seeing out there as far as some rules and regulations that our audience, these private practice owners, need to know about?
So the first mistake that I'm finding with a lot of private practices is they're trying to utilize video conferencing platforms, and they're being told they're HIPAA compliant, but what they don't realize is they're purchasing the non-HIPAA compliant module. And so it's not HIPAA compliant. And one of those tools that I'll mention is Zoom. Zoom is a great product. It's a great tool. But it's not really designed for telemedicine. They do have a HIPAA compliant version of itself, but the reason why therapists aren't doing it is it's very expensive, because it's several licenses that you end up getting, and it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of other tools. So I think it's really important that you know that you are getting the HIPAA agreements when you are signing up for the tool. It's very important that they have that, and that you see that, and that you know you're purchasing a HIPAA compliant software. The other thing you want to look for is everyday clinicians are breaking HIPAA guidelines, in my opinion. They're calling their families on their cell phone, they're texting their families, you name it, they're breaking it, and they're in breach of it, and they don't realize it. I actually just created a whole new 20-minute HIPAA training as a refresher for my employees, because sometimes we don't realize the necessity of protecting, and it's those little things that you forget. And so in telehealth, even just knowing where you're doing the services and that no one can hear or see what you're doing is really important. There has to be a privacy component beyond just the platform. You can't just be in Starbucks doing it. The other regulations that I think is really important is that you're documenting that it's being delivered as a telehealth, telemedicine component. And so I will throw out, just so you know, that there's a modifier when billing insurance that is modifier code 95, and that modifier code represents video technology, so that you show you are delivering the code with that modifier. And so I have a couple practices right now that have been successful billing insurance, private insurance, not Medicare, but also some HMOs, utilizing a service code of 99201 with the modifier 95, 99205 with the modifier 95. So you want to think of which billing codes you're doing. The other big thing is I always get release forms. I get release forms from my clinicians, I get release forms from my payer sources, and I get release forms from patients. I think it's so important. And depending on how you're utilizing the technology, the release form is different. But if you're providing mentorship and you're not delivering a direct service, you want to make sure that the family, the patient, whoever it may be, because I'm seeing this technology being utilized, just so you know, Scott, with all ages, birth to geriatric. Mm-hmm. I've got home health agencies utilizing it. And when I say I'm saying I've coached home health. I have private practice clients that are outpatient clinics, home health agencies. I have school-based providers that I've coached on this platform. I also have even had DME companies that are utilizing telehealth to educate, where they bring in specialists on coaching the families on utilizing a certain DME product. And so there's so many different ways, but you want to make sure your release forms identify it so it's not misleading. Because what happens is, let's say you're working with funding source and the patient thinks that they're getting therapy through you when you're really mentoring the therapist. Well, the funding source might say, you're not allowed to do teletherapy under this course. You want to make sure the family understands under these circumstances, you're not getting teletherapy, but your clinician's getting additional support in correlation to your treatment plan. So, yeah.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to mention on a cheat sheet, we'll put those codes on there and also the links to the regulations. And on there's also a link to an example of the consent forms. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I didn't want to forget that either.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that these tools and these resources are so important. One of the things I wanted to talk about is actually some of the misnomers or common concerns that I find people come up to me with. Because I do have guest lectures on telehealth, and a lot of the times they'll come up after me. And the first thing I always get is, I thought telehealth is just for physicians. And I just want to indicate that there are occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists, marriage and family therapists. There are psychologists. There are even acupuncturists I know that are utilizing telehealth in addition to physicians. There are registered dietitians doing telehealth. There's so many ways to do it. Now, the next misnomer is that people think I'm saying that every client qualifies for telehealth. And I will be first to tell you, Scott, is that it is the role of a clinician to assess if the technology will help advance the outcomes of the patient. Mm-hmm. So I am in no way saying that the one-on-one physical handling, physical therapy, I have a lot of ortho clinics utilizing it. It's not utilized until the patient is at a functional capacity where the telehealth is actual effective. And so I want to just hear that there is still an assessment that needs to happen. And from a best practices standpoint, I believe that an evaluation should always be done in person.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. And a lot of states have that regulation in place, but I also think that's best practices. I also believe that sometimes you start care in a one-to-one physical standpoint and you transition where maybe one time a week they're in your clinic and one time a week it's remote. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that you start to adopt as part of writing a treatment plan. And so just because you're offering telehealth, don't limit yourself where you think of it in this box. Realize it's a tool. And so that's really important.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an either or. It's either you get teletherapy at your home or nothing at all, or it's both and. You can come into my clinic and receive the therapy that, in the same room that I'm in, and then we can supplement that with some teletherapy. And to me, that works pretty well. Of course, it's not for every patient in my clinic. I mean, you have to, there again, you said you have to assess each patient individually and see if it's going to work for them. A lot of it's trial and error with the kids that we've treated using teletherapy. And sometimes you have to have different accommodations. You have to say, you know what, I need for you to have some headphones because in your house, the dog's barking and you're getting distracted. Or I need for you to put the computer over here facing the wall so you're not watching mom do the dishes over here or whatever. So you have to use your therapeutic skills in that regard and see the best practices. And one thing I also suggest is if you're not able to be there physically at all, whether it's if you're doing home health or you're doing it in your clinic or you're doing that in a school or somewhere else, if you could at least have them pan around the room with the camera and so you can see what they're looking at and get an assessment of the physical setup of the room, you can have a better idea to make that session the best that it can be.
I think the other thing to point out is that this is a tool where you can actually empower the parents or the caregivers on a day-to-day basis. So everyone knows that what you see in the clinic is not always what happens at home, and that ability to support, engage, and empower a caregiver of any capacity while they're in that environment, while they're going through that, whether it's a behavioral modification shift or a sensory processing shift or a functional gait training transitional shift, whatever it may be, sometimes walking them through it in real time in their natural environment is the most effective way to engage and empower them.
Mm-hmm. When we've set that up in our clinic before, like I said, when we see them in the clinic, we're like, okay, well, here's some teletherapy. I want you to walk through this with me while you're sitting beside me. That usually helps instead of, they're actually remotely away. If there's a glitch, you're going to have an issue. But if there's a glitch and they're sitting beside you, you can really help them figure out how to get past that technology. And with the kids in our clinic, I think kids in general, they're so tuned in to the technology and they see my face on their smartphone or their computer and they're just instantly glued to that and they're paying attention to that. Now, each kid can be a little bit different. If you have some vision issues or some hearing deficits, you have to pay attention to that. But for a lot of kids, I mean, their attention might really, wax and wane in the clinic, but that teletherapy session, they can really be tuned in and that attention can actually improve through a teletherapy session.
So one of the things I also want to talk about is strategies for utilizing a telehealth platform or teletherapy platform as an outside of the box tool. Because again, sometimes people only think of that one-to-one video live chat, but there's so many different ways that you can utilize it depending on the platform. And we're going to talk about one of the platforms that I endorse, but there are other platforms out there. So I'm not here, as you know, Scott, to sell anything. I'm here to just open the eyes to the technology that's out there. And one of the ways that telehealth platforms are helping therapists is actually through patient engagement. So I'm going to throw you a couple different ideas out there just for that take-home facts or ideas for your private practice.
And we'll put these on the cheat sheet too.
Absolutely. So the first is utilizing a telehealth platform as a patient engagement portal. Imagine if you could start every single new patient with a patient orientation via live or pre-recorded video via telehealth platform, meaning that you can walk them through what the expectations of the patient and the caregiver are, walk them through the role of the private practice, the clinician, the regulations, the goals for the relationship, payment responsibility, all of these things where it is available on that platform for the patient to reference in the future. And it's recorded all in a HIPAA compliant way, but there's also an engagement that starts the flow of the relationship really strong. So that's one thing. The second thing that's a little bit outside the box is imagine if you could engage your clinical collaboration in a whole nother way, utilizing the telehealth platform to bring in the clinical collaboration. Maybe it's the physician, the pediatrician, the teacher, the caregiver, the parent, the grandparent, anyone where they might still be in your clinic getting therapy, but maybe mom can't make it for that visit. What if you could telemedicine, telehealth her in, where she can still be part of the therapy from the office of where she works? There's so many ways to utilize it to better the outcomes and more than just a delivery method, if that makes sense. The final thing, and this is where my private practices that I coach are bringing in exponentially more money, is they're creating value-driven transitional care programs. Your patient maxes out and caps out their insurance benefit. Mom and dad can't continue to pay whatever it may be from $70, $60, $80, $100 a visit to come in every week. They just don't have the funds. So imagine if you had a way to assign them real-time home programs that they could watch with videos and do live video visits at a reduced cost so that they continue their care, but it's not necessarily the same one-to-one, and maybe they come to the clinic once a month or once every other month as part of a transitional care program for a monthly cash fee that's very value-driven.
That's a great idea. Well, and as private practice owners, we have to, as you said, think out of the box and take this tool that is a very powerful tool, and it's so new, such a new feature, to try to use that in different ways in order to maximize what our patients receive from us. So those are great ideas, and we'll definitely put those on the cheat sheet. And before we wrap this up, Brandon, I want to go over one of the platforms that I use and that you endorse. And on the cheat sheet, I think I put like 14 different platforms. And I mean, we've researched this pretty intensively as far as what's available out there. BlueJay Engage is what I'm using. It's such a slick product and so robust that I was really taken back when I went through the demo. I was like, well, I've got to try this. What I liked about it was that it's very clean and simple for both the therapist and the patient. I mean, they also have an app that is really, I mean, it's well thought out. It's very clean. It's easy to use. And basically, I mean, when you get a new patient, you enter them into the system, you set your prices right there. They pay before the session actually happens. Now, BlueJay can run that payment, or you can run the payment in a different way. Once that session is set up, they sit in a virtual waiting room, which I thought was super cool, because on my computer, it pops up on my screen and it says, so-and-so is in the waiting room. And I'm like, is that like in my clinic waiting room? No, they're in BlueJay waiting room. They're waiting for me over there for the teletherapy session. I thought that was super cool. Another thing it has, once that session is set up, is that the patient and yourself get updates. So the patient gets both a text message, an email, and they can also get a push notification through the app, which helps them remember, I've got therapy today. So they sign up. Now, what's super cool, and you mentioned it here, as far as assigning videos, assigning exercises, BlueJay has that built into their system. And they have a whole bunch of videos in their library. I mean, you can just say, I want so-and-so to do this video, that one. You can assign those exercises or those tasks. But what's even more cool than that is I can shoot a little short video on my iPhone. I can upload it to BlueJay, and I can assign it to my patients right there. And I can actually have them do the exercise on the video so they can see themselves do the exercise, assign it to them through BlueJay. They have to be accountable for that. They have to check off on that, because I'm going to assign it in a very specific way and say, you know what, 3 times a week, you're going to do this exercise for 10 reps. I want you to check off on that every day, and I can go in there and check that they did that. I love the accountability of that. That's so powerful to give that extra care to my patients. On top of that, they have surveys kind of built in. So the patient gets to give feedback on how they're doing on those exercises. That is gauged through it. They graph that out as far as the outcomes on that. So you get to see in a graph form outcomes of what the patient is doing. Now, they also have built in there options for live chat. So you can chat live outside of a session, or you can just send messages outside of the session. And this is all HIPAA compliant. It's within their software package. It's such a powerful tool. I was so blown away when I went through the demo on this that I was like, yes.
I agree, Scott, and I appreciate you breaking down everything. I found BlueJay just about end of last year. I was doing a lot in the telehealth, and someone that I know in the EMR world said, Brandon, you've got to check out this platform. And I was fortunate enough to not only check out the platform, but meet the team. And it's one of the most incredible teams that I've met. They are so concerned about giving the greatest quality platform and transforming the way that we empower and engage patients, that they created this engagement platform. it is a telehealth tool, but it is truly a patient engagement platform.
Mm-hmm.
And through just my experience with them, I started implementing it for some of my clients. And each and every client that's utilizing it has been blown away. And I have clients utilizing it for direct care. I have clients utilizing it for clinical collaboration. I have clients utilizing it just for mentorship, literally just as a mentorship tool. I have a pediatric home health company that has engaged the platform so that all of their clinicians in the field, have real-time access to their supervisor. At any point, they can actually launch a live video visit during office hours with a clinical support supervisor. So that, hey, it might be a 5-minute, it might be a 15-minute, but being able to engage and empower clinicians when they don't know something is the key to transforming care in today's environment. So I've seen it from all different angles in terms of it engaging patients, it helping scale private practices in terms of increasing revenue with what's going on in the current healthcare environment. And then I've also seen it just be a tool for communication internally with the HIPAA compliant texting, the live chat, etc. And so I do think this type of tool is the future. BlueJay Engage also has integrated with certain EMRs, which is great. They have the ability and capability to do an API feed, is what it's called, with pretty much any EMR that's open. They also have a documentation component for those who don't have an EMR, but they are not an EMR. So I just want to be clear about that. You can do live documentation in the platform, store the data HIPAA compliant, but it really is not designed necessarily to replace your EMR unless you're not utilizing an EMR and just need what I call the EMR light version, so to speak. But
well, if you're not billing insurance and just doing cash pay, you could probably get away with just using, writing the notes right there.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to throw out this offer too, and Scott, you can post it. I really am passionate about therapists growing their practices while increasing their outcomes. And so something that I'm willing to offer to anyone who's interested is I would be happy to give you 30-minute free overview, not just of the BlueJay Engage platform, but really hear and listen to what your challenges are and see if this type of platform would integrate effectively into your program, into your therapy practice to help reach new milestones and goals for your company. And that would be my gift to all of the private practice owners and managers out there listening to this.
That's very generous. So 30 minutes with Brandon. He's going to demonstrate BlueJay Engage and what it can do for your practice, and that's a freebie. I will put a link in the show notes and also on the cheat sheet on there of how they can sign up with you and schedule that 30-minute meeting. Thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
Absolutely. The other thing is I talked to the BlueJay Engage team before this, Scott. I told them, that we were really passionate about sharing what's going on in telehealth, but also inviting people to explore this tool. And so what BlueJay Engage wanted to offer is they said that they're doing a very special offer for your following, Scott, and they're going to offer their platform as a very one-time only $9.99 a month for the first 3 months with no obligations, cancel anytime. And so we're going to have those links for you with the service code on your page as well, so that anyone who wants to try it, and they can try it without going through a free 30-minute discussion about it, or they can just jump on if they're one of those, I just want to learn it, see it, experience it, they can sign up as well. And again, it's month to month. There's no strings attached, but I think you have to think with the platform. You have to think outside of the box so that you can maximize your effectiveness as a clinician in private practice in today's environment.
Well, and I truly believe once you see it, and especially if you use it one time, you'll know the power of it, and that it's so inexpensive to use. And then, like you said, there's no yearly obligation. You can cancel at any time. The power of using that is that you have to actually use it. You can't just say, oh yeah, I'll pay for that and I might use it. You go through it with one session, even if it's with another therapist in your practice, have them walk in the other room and walk through it. And then you'll understand what the potentiality of using Blue Jay Engage is. I appreciate them offering that lower price point. That's great.
I have a practice that I'm consulting on, and they were skeptical at first, and they come back to me and said that they love it. But one of the things that we noticed, we track their profit and loss statement. We have a line item for Blue Jay Engage income, and they're showing a net profit over $1,000 a month from the platform, just in terms of the transitional care program.
That's a nice return on investment.
Yeah. So wonderful. Well, I really appreciate being here today, Scott. I think the goal of telehealth is to be an additional tool, not to replace what they're already doing, but just to add one more tool in the tool belt.
Yes, definitely. So check it out. Go over to startatherapypractice.com/71. Get the cheat sheet. There'll be a link over there if you want to connect with Brandon and have him give you a tour of Blue Jay Engage. And then, just chat with Brandon. He's full of information. And I appreciate you sharing today, Brandon.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you. Okay, I really enjoyed speaking with Brandon again. I mean, that guy's just a wealth of knowledge. So he did mention that he's going to be doing some speaking. So if you're able to catch him at one of these conferences, be sure to check a little bit out Brandon, because he's a very good speaker. Also, go by the website startatherapypractice.com/71 to download that free teletherapy cheat sheet. And don't forget, if you sign up with Blue Jay, you will get the first 3 months at a very discounted rate. I mean, I think it's like you're paying a third of what the usual rate is. So it's just a little bit of nothing just to try it out for 3 months. So go by the website and click on that link in order to get that discounted 3 months. I did want to mention that I'm not always real quick on social media or even with an email reply, because I order my day in a very deliberate manner to maximize my output. I mean, I have to. I've got 6 kids. I've got 2 clinics. I've got to take care of my own health. So that being said, feel free to email me or tag me on social media. Just know that I'm not hanging out on social media. Don't always leave my email open. I will get back with you, but it might take me, 2 or 3 days to actually do that. You might get lucky and I might actually be on the social media or on my email and jump right in there. If I'm on there, I love to reply. I love that interaction on social media, but I have to limit it because it is so addictive, isn't it? You can get really sucked in. And probably the best way to contact me is by email, scott@startatherapypractice.com. All right, that's it. Until next time, Godspeed to you and to your private practice.